got one panel left, and it's a really good one. And then after the panel, Nancy Hill's going to come up, a couple of closing remarks, and then we've got the exciting Partner Awards, once again graciously sponsored by MediaLink. And I was talking to a couple of panelists, before I came up here, and just to get reacquainted with what the theme of their content is going to be. And Susan Credle from Leo Burnett so eloquently said, "Title it, We're Screwed." So I said, what does that mean? And then she was kind of joking, but they actually are going to come out and talk about the issues that are facing the industry today in terms of how we're challenged, how fast-paced it is, how we have to reinvent ourselves every day. And it has to do with talent in the industry. It has to do with new creative opportunities. It has to do with risk-taking in the marketplace. And I couldn't think of a better group of people, two great women and two great men. We've got Sally Kennedy, who is going to be out here from, she is CEO of Publicis Hawkeye. Susan Credle is Chief Creative Officer of Leo Burnett. We've got Mike Sheldon, who is CEO of Deutsch North America. We also have John Butler, Executive Creative Director from BSSP. And the panel is going to be moderated by Lisa Granatstein, longtime editor of Adweek. So please give a really nice welcome to our last panel of the day. You guys want to come out, ladies? Thank you. Good?
Good luck.
Hey, Bill.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. And thank you, Sally, Mike, Susan, and John. We're going to kick it off by talking about one of the most pressing issues facing the industry today, and that is recruiting and retaining talent. Before we begin, I wanted to share this little nugget from a few years ago. So back in 2011, a surprising 4A's and Arnold Worldwide survey found that 30% of the collective agency workforce turned over within just 12 months. And a lot has been done to correct this problem, but as the industry continues to evolve, there's even more competition vying for the same talent. So I would love to hear from the panel, how screwed are you? No, really, in terms of retention, how is it affecting your company and how are you managing it? We could start with you, John.
Yeah, well, I mean, recruitment and retention are probably really, even though I'm an executive creative director responsible for the work that goes out the door, it's probably my primary concern. It's what I really focus on. How we do that really is a lot of the retention stuff has to do with what I would call soft culture stuff. We try and make it as fun as we possibly can. Mm-hmm. We have a pretty liberal vacation policy. We pay everybody's health care. We have since the day we started. That wasn't necessarily about retention. It was just we felt it was the right thing to do. But it's turned into a great tool for retention. Mm-hmm. We let them bring dogs to the office. As long as they don't crap in the conference room, they can stay. So we do that sort of stuff that I think is pretty important for retention. But the biggest thing that I think that we've been successful at doing is we let people own things. I was reading some time ago, I think it was in a Thomas Friedman column. He had this quote that's just a dynamite quote. I don't think he wrote it, but it was, no one washes a rental car. And if you think about it, it's like if you don't own something, you don't take care of it. You treat it like shit. So, we try and let our people own their pieces of business. The account directors have the relationship with the client. The creative directors have the relationship with the client. I mean, Greg and I are there, certainly, and we maybe help steer, but it's their show. And I think, believe it or not, particularly for me, I don't have a lot of deep pockets, maybe, when it comes to being able to pay these people maybe what they could make working for Susan.
Whoa.
Okay, sorry. Sorry. But, that's what keeps them around, I think, is that.
And Susan, when we spoke last week, you had just come back from a 3-hour retention meeting. So this is pretty top of mind for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were
I agree with you that autonomy, I think, is one of the most important things you can do, and let leaders lead. Micromanagement, I think, is the easiest way to lose people. I also think respect, that to really respect people and realize that this is a batting average game and that not every time is it going to be perfect. And you've got to be, I think as leaders, you've got to be okay with some failure from the people underneath you and allow that. We talk about fail fast and fail forward. I'm not sure a lot of us are comfortable with it, but I think it's necessary to let leaders feel like they have that ability. And we meet, I think you're right, is retention is always a subject. It doesn't come and go, but the 3 hours is really a lot of ours, that meeting was not only about retention, but how do we continue to diversify who comes into the agency, like you said, because so many people are after the best talent. And also, how do we get new talent that's not necessarily brought up in advertising and marketing, but just comes with a creative way of thinking about the world? And that's really interesting to us right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, there's a certain reality, which is at the lower levels, you'll have higher turnover, and at the higher levels, you'll have lower turnover. And so there's a dynamic in the business that always exists, that you are going to have turnover. But I think for us, the best way to retain talent is the same thing, it is the best way to run an agency, which is grow, have great accounts, do great work, be diversified into a lot of different disciplines, experiment and innovate. And if you're running the best business you know how to run, you'll have great people that will flock to you and stay. The other thing that's really critical is picking the right clients. And we used to say in the old days that we want good money, the ability to do great work, and good clients. We'll take 2 out of 3. Good people, I mean. And now, in our older age, it's all about good people. Because if we have great people that treat us well, they'll let us do great work, they'll let us make good money, reasonable profit. So if you know that you have a client that loves and respects you and treats you well, then you're going to more likely stay with that agency. And it means saying no to a whole bunch of potential new business that means foregoing some revenue. But it's one of the keys to retention.
But not everybody can do that.
Not everybody can do that, but if you start populating your agency with bad clients, you're going to have a bad agency. It's back and forth. And some of the clients,
Yep.
I wanted to steal your eSurance client this morning. It's so
Alan,
awesome.
wherever you are, don't talk to Mike.
But I mean, they're in the craft. Like there's a lot of great human beings out there. So there's far fewer, what I'll call tough, bad clients.
Right.
But it's critical to a culture and to retention.
Okay. And so,
I think our challenge has been a little bit different over the last year. We brought 2 teams together. We brought Publicis Dallas and Hawkeye together. And so change is always good and exciting. Change can also be threatening.
Right.
So obviously we're managing through some of that at all levels of the organization. But I also think, interestingly, one of our biggest challenges is attracting people to Dallas in the first place. But then once they get here and they understand, I'm doing a bit of a crib for Texas right now, it's a great lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so I think once people come and they understand that the economics of the state and they have a great lifestyle, then we're less likely to lose them on the backside.
So where are you all finding your best hires these days? Where are they coming from?
Lou Burnett. And Publicis and Butler Shine.
Your resumes are
They're coming from all over. I think one of the smarter things that we did in the last probably 10 years is we have an employee referral program. You can make money if you work for BSSP and you bring a good person in and we hire them. It's a lot cheaper than a headhunter, right? And we've found a lot of really great people that way. But think about it, your people really should be an evangelist for your company. So it actually gets people kind of out there talking about the company in a positive way, and we've hired some great people that way.
Yeah. Are there any unorthodox places that you're looking or you're hearing about, whether they're, just like the other panel about millennials starting their own companies and poaching them? I mean,
We just started last year a project called No to 66, and it's a project really focused on changing diversity at our agency and hopefully within the industry. But what we realized is that a lot of young people were coming out of portfolio schools, which are fantastic, but a lot of people with creative talent can't afford to go to portfolio schools, and we were worried that we might be missing some really interesting creative talent. So we actually have these events where we invite people to come in that are, whether they're poets, songwriters, artists, graphic designers, street artists, and they come in, and we kind of have made a commitment that we'll take care of taking that creative talent and sort of guiding it towards what it's like to be at an agency. Sort of like the old days when you had, you really did have mentors within the agency, and you taught people how to become marketing creative writers. And like we said, we've just started, but I'm excited to see. We had 200 people at our last event come in and drop off their art and talk about what maybe a career in advertising might be like.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
I've actually done a 180 from when I first came down to Dallas. I've been here now 4 years, and when I first came down, I thought we absolutely had to recruit from New York and LA, and that we needed to pull in from the big markets and get that type of talent. And it doesn't always work out. And we've had great success finding, it's tough with the middle level talent, but we have great success with young talent and then senior talent. And a lot of times Texans, there's something in the water with Texas. They've gone and they've been in the big markets, and then they want to come home. And it's just, there's a connective tissue there. We're looking internationally, because it helps us to recruit international folks that want to come to the States rather than necessarily getting over that hurdle of New York to Dallas.
Well, it's interesting. In Adweek, actually, today we have a story about liquid talent, which is this act of training cross-discipline and allowing travel to other markets.
Yeah.
Do any of you do that? Or, I mean, some of you are networks and holding companies. Are you able to do that, give your teams that opportunity?
We've told our people in both LA and New York that if they want to transfer between offices, we'll facilitate all of that, because we want that cross-pollination. We want the culture of each of those offices to be connected to the other. But the thing that we also do is we hire opportunistically. So we will hire before we have any need for it if we find great people. Because what we find is that when you go into new business, the client wants to know who's the account person and who's the creative person that's going to be on my business.
Right.
And you're either going to say it's this person, and then you're going to screw up an account that you currently have, or you have spare parts ready to go. And so we've been doing that a lot for the last few years. And when you can say to a client, this is the person who's going to run your business, we've had them working on various special projects, but they're ready to go. It's a huge closing tool for a new business pitch.
Yeah.
So earlier today, there was a CMO panel, and they talked about how AOR was a necessity. In fact, it should be mandatory. And yet, we're hearing more about project-based work being more in the mix than ever before, and retainer work is dwindling. So how are your agencies managing this in terms of the staffing, in terms of the fluidity, and also ensuring that you're taking good care of your existing clients?
It's interesting. I find this whole project and agency of record or retainer a very interesting conversation. I was telling a friend of mine, I said, to me sometimes it feels like discussing what's the best body of water, whether it's a tub, a shower, a river, a lake, an ocean. Like there are different things for different needs. And I'm finding as many clients coming to us saying, I want a one-stop. If you please do as much of it as you can for me. Right. So even though we're hearing specialties and lots of little things, and I want to, a project-based sort of relationship, it's not playing out necessarily that way where we are. I'm seeing just as much conversation of it's too confusing, I can't manage it, I don't have any time to really think about my job because I'm trying to get all these specialty agencies to get on board. And I think we're going to come back to some kind of partnership relationship with big brands, because we have to be able to think short-term and long-term. And to be able to think long-term requires a commitment of people to an idea, and as much as I say the biggest ego in the room has to be the brand, especially if there's lots of agencies working on it, human nature, it's really hard to make that happen.
Yeah, you heard that from the woman who had worked at Kraft this morning, and she talked about making agencies partners. And we're finding not so much project work, it's mainly AOR, but smaller companies, not startups. Last year we did a company called Mophie, which makes battery packs for your phone, Vivint, which is the world's largest home security, Avo, which is shopping service for attorneys. So they're not project work, but they're not these household names yet. So we're doing a lot more of that.
Yeah.
And then we're also finding that there's clients who are just saying, just do it all. Like, there's just too much confusion in my life. It's too complicated. It's too hard. Just, if you can, do it all.
Yeah. It's interesting. I call those the industry of one, which is these wonderful new businesses that are starting up, and I think they need a partner more than anybody in marketing because they're not going to be an industry of one very long, and they better be a brand pretty fast before they're the business becomes commoditized.
Yeah, we actually, it's been really interesting bringing the Hawkeye team together with Publicis because we were typically AOR. I would say 90% of the Hawkeye business was project-based, although they had some very large accounts, multiple millions of dollars, but all driven project-based. But what's been really interesting is seeing the account people. And, the Hawkeye account people are hustlers. They're fantastic. So we're learning from each other in terms of dealing with different types of business.
Right. Now, John, it may affect you a little differently.
Well, look, we've seen our business has definitely changed. There's a lot more project work. And, any pitch is tough, whether you're pitching for an AOR or project. And the reality is you got a bunch of clients in-house that are paying you to do what you're doing now. So we're pretty careful about it. I think if you walk the halls, people would say, oh, we're always pitching something. And we are always pitching something, but we've also turned down 10 things too, The biggest thing about projects for me is I think if the project world is going to continue, then that whole conflict thing has to go away. We got to get rid of it because, think about that, right? We had I won't name names, but we had a client come in over the holiday season last year for a 3-month project. And then we had another one come in that was, I didn't even really see it as a conflict, but it was in sort of the same space. And they just said, this is a conflict for us. And I'm a cynic, and I wanted to say, well, you know what, maybe why don't you book us for a year then, But it was a 3-month engagement. So that's the thing that we've got to kind of figure out as an industry. And, I'm not sure what the answer to that is.
Yeah, we got a project from Target wanted to do a experiential event, and they found out that we have an experiential practice. So we showed them the experiential work, then a bunch of TV. Yeah. Just kind of snuck that in there. And that was 3 years ago. They gave us a TV project after that, for the Olympics. And it was all about giving back and Target on track to give $1 billion to education by now at Target. And then it turned into like our 3rd biggest account. So it's still project work. We share the agency, the relationship with 72 and Sunny and an in-house department and partners in Spade in Minneapolis. But this little tiny project thing turned into what's pretty big.
Not me.
Is that you, God?
You're all awake now, I hope.
We good?
But there is, with the short-term work, is there some element of risk that you're deterred from taking because you don't have this long-term relationship with your clients as you would a year-long project or longer? Does it affect that at all in terms of your creative?
I think you make decisions about the type of projects you want to take on, and if they're good, creative opportunities, or you see there's a ramp. We try not to take projects where we know they're fixed and it's over and done, but there's more opportunity. So I think there's projects and projects.
Right. So again, earlier today, Robert Rodriguez talked about failure being a good thing. And Susan, you were just talking about how you let your teams fail forward, and how comfortable are you with doing that?
Well, I don't love failure at all. I
Right.
mean, I'll be the first to admit it. I'd rather not have it. But I do. It's interesting. I remember I was in the business. I don't know. I was working on Singular Wireless, and I think Daryl Evans is here. But I wrote a spot, and we shot it, and it didn't make it to air, and I was crushed. And he said, "Why are you so upset?" And I said, "Because you thought you trusted me, and now we've spent money and we haven't done it, and I feel terrible." And he said, "Have you looked at your batting average lately?" And I'd never thought about it like that. And I realized I don't want people starting off in the business to think about a batting average, because really they don't have one yet. So they need to be hustling, and I think they need to hit it out of the park all the time. But I do think that as leaders to really think about a batting average and looking at the whole. And again, this is why a partnership is so important, because if you're on a project based, every time it doesn't allow you to fail because it's a project and you have to succeed, versus a partnership is really a journey together, and you do allow for failures. And I've watched it over my career, and the best relationships, I've seen a lot of failure, but I've seen even more success.
Yeah. So you've seen much more success in partnerships, but are there sometimes just too many cooks in the kitchen?
You know, it's interesting. When people come into my office and they say, "I don't like working with this group because they're not very good collaborators," I usually say, "Ooh, I think you just told me you're not very talented," because I find that talented people want to work with talented people, and the only time I don't see collaboration happening usually is when there's a lack of talent there. So when I hear that there's difficulty collaborating or too many cooks, it's not usually too many, it's just the wrong ones.
I love what Robert said this morning. May you all go fail greatly. Like, that was awesome. And I think failure is just an awesome part of business. You have to do that. But I also believe that it's all about risk-taking and invention and innovation. And if you're innovating and you're starting new divisions and you're investing in digital and social and building out different practices, it's impossible. If you have good people, it's impossible to fail, because eventually those people will get it right. So the only failure is really not trying. That's where you can screw up in this business. That's where you won't grow. You've got to be innovating, and through that innovation will come success eventually.
Yeah.
And I also think, I mean, it's much cheaper to fail now because of all of the different channels and the production costs and things. So we all need to take risks and encourage that, and hold hands with our clients and make sure we're all doing it together. That's the critical thing.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I am curious about when it comes to edgy work, how do you balance your client demands for data and testing with your own gut instinct? I mean, does data always win, or can you convince them?
I think it's really tough right now, particularly for all of our CMO partners, because they're so accountable, and so the risk of failure for them is significant, and it can be career limiting, and we have to be cognizant of that. But there's testing and there's testing, and we all know when we do the quant testing, so often it's respondents respond to rational things, and we know in our gut that they're not the things that are going to create desire and move the needle. Right. But we've had success moving more of our clients to a qualitative testing, and then you have to listen hard. But we've just had a great experience with a new client where we did go through 2 waves of qualitative testing. And I would say the work has become dramatically better for it. So it's worked to our advantage.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think data and humanity together are the most interesting combination. And data without an interesting person questioning, looking at it, thinking about it in different ways that are creative is not very interesting. But I think when you put a creative, interesting person looking at data and thinking how it can be viewed and used, then it gets very interesting.
Okay. Oh.
We had an account, TGI Fridays, many years ago. Some of you guys here worked on it. I'm sorry about that. And they would test the shit out of everything. So the food, the price point, the advertising, the end line, the blah, 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 number of seconds on everything. And we could get it between everything that the client did and everything that we did to be, whatever the top score was for the testing. And we'd go to the franchisees and we'd say, we got another big winner on our hands. And then we'd go run the advertising and nothing would work. And what would happen is the food was okay, the price point was okay, the advertising looked like everything else in the category. But the fundamental problem was nobody was going to TGI Fridays because the food wasn't great and the experience wasn't great and they didn't have enough money. So you could do all the testing in the world and still fall flat on your face. And I gotta say, if I had to take all the stuff that we've done over the last 17 years at Deutsch and the stuff that got heavily tested and the stuff that was purely on gut, the gut stuff probably would win 80% of the time. And it's not because testing's wrong. We researched the heck out of a lot of stuff. But when you lean on it to make your decisions, it's all over.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl, Mike. What did it take to convince your client, Mophie, to go for an apocalyptic scenario with God losing power? And they were a first-timer, too.
Oh, you should have seen what we didn't run.
Tell us.
So we had a spot for Mophie on the Super Bowl. I don't know if you guys saw it. The whole world is completely screwed up. At the end, you see God, and his phone had died. And so the line is, when you're out of power, God knows what will happen. And it was a very easy sell, actually, because Pete Favot, who's our chief creative officer, who you know and love, he always says, the strategy's the idea. The execution is just an expression of that idea. And the idea here was, when you're out of power, you're out of power. So we had a whole bunch of executions that came off of that. The client bought into that idea so that when we actually expressed it, that was just a very natural outcome of that idea. We got no pushback. We did a lot of focus groups, a lot of testing, and we had no issue with God being out of power for whatever reason.
Did you still feel that there was a little risk involved? Did you kind of hold your breath when you released it?
Well, we had done that testing. We cast an African-American God, and we thought that someone like that could be an issue, and we got 0.
Wow.
People loved the spot, and
Yeah.
I guess God was watching.
Wow. So Susan always ran the Like a Girl spot during the Super Bowl. It was incredibly inspiring. We've seen a couple of other female empowerment ads throughout the year from Verizon and Goldie Blocks, Under Armour. So are these girl power ads just a trend?
I don't know if they're a trend, but I do think that we might reach a point where we might want to have a few other conversations along with them, and we'll see when that happens. I think that we as marketers tend to go where the world needs us to go, and as much as I would like to say that we don't have an issue with females feeling empowered, it still feels like, if you look at the numbers, we do. So I think that's where brands that want to have purpose in people's lives, they look for where the world needs them to show up and take the mantle. And so I think we'll continue to see it. It will be interesting to see if my father has a T-shirt that says, I'm so far behind, I think I'm first. It'll be interesting to see who's the last one to do it, and you go, yeah, we've seen that. But again, I think that's part of doing what we do in this business is having a gut feeling for when the conversation needs to take a break or when somebody is ready for something else to be talked about.
Yeah, and how has you did a sequel this month as well.
Yeah.
How is that doing for you?
Very well. And I think those conversations, it also depends on what brands are appropriate, and that always comes into a girl's life right when the startling statistic about confidence and puberty plummets. So, I think it was the right conversation, particularly for that brand.
Okay. All right, so switching gears, there's been a lot of concern in recent years about protecting consumer data, but there's also concern about protecting your clients' data and that of your own. Late last year, we all witnessed the epic hack attack at Sony Pictures. And I'm wondering, how have you all prepared your agencies so you don't become, the Sony Pictures of advertising? How do you ensure that all that embarrassing information about your clients and the creative doesn't get out there?
Well, if they're trying to hack Butler, Shine, and Stern's email, they're bored. I did go down to the head of IT the next day and said, dude, do we have to worry about this? And he's going, no, I can pretty much tell when anyone's surfing porn, though. So I thought that was interesting. No, I'm okay. I'm okay there. But we haven't really thought too much about it, frankly, with our data. But it's something to think about for sure. It's a concern.
I mean, I think you have to be careful. I remember years ago, before any of this happened, a friend of mine had a very joking, email conversation with another colleague where they just, I don't think they meant 90% of it, but it was pretty, locker room type stuff and bashing everybody. And then there was a little bit of one of them had to let the other one go. And it was, these things exist.
Yeah.
What do I do? And how sensitive a situation is it? And I think, look, it shouldn't take technology for us to, behave like civilized human beings. And I don't think, trashing and saying things because we don't think anybody else is going to see them is really the right way to behave as human beings. And Andrew Robertson said years ago, he said, if you can say it without saying anything, do that. If you can't do that, have a private conversation in a room alone. Maybe then a conversation on the phone, but definitely don't do any of this in email. And I think, it's a good rule to live by.
And live by, figure there's always a camera on.
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't feel comfortable saying it, don't write it.
Yeah.
So no one reacted with any extra company policies or any extra, protection?
We're having more discussions about copyright issues and, how do you protect clients from work that gets out, because there's no closed network anymore, this is a whole new thing that we're going to all have to deal with. Even things like password protected portfolios, because that's work that then gets out. It's going to get really interesting.
Yeah, everyone's got a website now. Every kid, and you look at it and you go, oh, geez. You put that on there, huh? Something that the client didn't want us to do, and it was the comp,
right,
or whatever. Even if it's a video comp. That one hasn't. The other shoe hasn't dropped on that
it's
yet.
Coming.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the topic of tech, this past year also at CES and South by, there was a lot of talk about wearables and virtual reality and drones. How is this figuring into your work now? Are you just testing the waters, or is it starting to become like are these becoming bona fide marketing tools?
We're actually using a drone on production next week for one of our clients. I think wearables really are the next cell phone. I'm still trying to figure out if you're going to have a wearable and a cell phone, and when you lose the cell phone, and how all that's going to work. Yeah. But I think it's just the next thing, and we have to be thinking about it.
Yeah. Mike.
We've got a guy. His name's Sabri. He's literally a rocket scientist from MIT. Who sits in a room, and he's got all kinds of the Oculus stuff and drones and playing with video games and a lot of advanced technology. And part of what he does is he teaches people what's current. Part of what he does is build things for clients and for new business pitches. And part of it is just great on the new business tour, because it's like going to this little weird cave of a guy making stuff. But I think what's most important is exposing that kind of stuff to your people so that they know what it is that cutting edge is in terms of technologies and wearables and the new stuff. So it's like its own little lab. What we're going to do exactly with it, I don't know yet. We're still playing around with that stuff.
Susan?
I think we're back at the same discussion we've always had, which is technology the idea, or is there an idea that uses technology to express itself? And I tend to be in the latter camp, which is that it's good to be aware of all these things so that when you are trying to create something for the brand, that you know what's out there to help you bring an idea to life. But I think just jumping on technology for technology's sake, you can end up chasing a lot of things that I don't think you get a great ROI on.
Yeah, I mean, wearables, no. Drones seem so 2013 to me, I don't know. But we're doing a lot more utilities. We're prototyping more and more utilities, and I would just define that as something that makes a consumer's life easier in some way. So I've definitely noticed that, particularly with Mini and Priceline and whatnot. When we go to present stuff to them, we're showing them things and we're building things. And so technology plays a role in it, but it's really to serve something larger.
So do you think within the next 12 months we'll see some virtual reality campaign come out, or?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think to Susan's idea, it's more about what it is that's going to actually provide value and commerce for your client. When we pitched Pizza Hut earlier this year, later last year, we came up with this thing called Pizzarama, which is, that little, they call it a Barbie stand that goes in between the pizza and the top of the box so it doesn't smush your pizza down. Okay. Well, little girls use those as Barbie stands, so that's what the industry calls them. So anyway, we took that, and we put a little device on top where you could spin it, you could wind it up, and then you could put your cell phone on it, your iPhone, and then hit video, and it would take a slow motion picture of you, of everybody eating the pizza. And we showed it to them and we had built that for them. So now we're in prototyping and testing, and eventually we'll have that as a thing for Pizza Hut to put out in the world. Wow. But it's that kind of thing where it comes out of an idea. It comes out of pizza's very shareable, and people want to share stuff on social media. So we built something purpose-built because it reflected the strategy that the client was after.
Okay. So I'm curious, who here is going to buy an Apple Watch next month? Who's lining up? Yeah. What interests you about it?
I'll buy one just because I'm in this business and I feel like I need to understand it. If I wasn't in this business, I don't know that I'd be rushing out to get a watch, which I haven't worn in years.
Do you think there'll be some ads eventually on it somehow, through some apps, like teeny screen?
I did think that little icon that showed up on my iPhone was a bit presumptuous. It's like, really?
Every time there's an ad,
I don't even have it.
Your wrist
There it is.
vibrate. Okay, so we're just a few minutes away from cocktails and awards. So I'm going to wrap up with a crystal ball question for you. What issues do you think we'll be talking about this time next year? We'll start with you, John.
I think it's going to be the AOR versus project, and how we, do we turn into production companies? And all I mean by that is, production company, there's not a real staff, right? They kind of bring them in and then they go. They bring them in and then they go. And, it's the toughest part about projects is trying to figure out, at the end of the year, potentially you can have a big hole, right? And you didn't lose anything. It just, it's non-recurring revenue. So how do you staff for that? And I think that's going to be something that we'll talk about as an industry for some time.
Susan?
I think one thing that I'm curious about is how we continue to make things. Because I think technology is moving so quickly that I do worry about bringing all that production and making inside the agency versus going back to like a production model from film where, like John said,
but you could do it that way.
You understand the creative and the thinking and the idea of what you want to make, but you go find the best makers out there at the time to collaborate with. And that's something that I'm interested in, is how much can you actually afford to build in-house, and not only afford financially, but afford because it changes so rapidly. Like people that invested in Flash and then found that they're sitting there with a lot of Flash designers that don't have much to do. So I'm interested in the production side, and as technology evolves, how do we do that?
Okay.
What I'd like to see, and what I hope we'll see more of, is bundling, bringing all the disciplines together and having an agency and a client working side by side on advertising and digital and social and platforms and experiential and design and music and production, and I think in media and media buying and comms planning, because I think that we have lost a lot as an industry by clients having 15 different vendors who don't know each other, who show up maybe at a meeting once a quarter or once every 6 months. And the fact that we don't spend a lot of time sometimes with our media partners on behalf of a client is criminal. And I think this thing of specialization, I get that we're all supposed to be specialists, but I think it can all be done under one roof. And I think it can be brought together a lot better in service of our clients and of the creative work.
I'd like to think that we're all talking about the massive weight loss decline in America because we're all wearing wearables and we're all starting to walk up more because we're all shaking and whatever. I hope, I mean, building on what you said, I hope that we're celebrating more storytelling and our craft as an industry, because with marketing automation and programmatic buying, so much of the bottom end of the funnel is going to be taken care of, and I think there's going to be a renewed emphasis on brilliant storytelling by real practitioners that know what they're doing. I hope.
I'm sure. Well, we're out of time. Please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. Thank you.